At long last, the 2026 preseason is officially in the books. The New England Patriots capped off exhibition play last night against the Cleveland Browns, falling by a score of 37-13 in a game that got out of hand early and revealed more than a couple of deficiencies within the Patriots' depth. Today, we look at whose stock is rising and whose is falling after a very forgettable Week 3 of preseason action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Patriots Roundtable Podcast. Alongside Tyler Geis, I'm Eddie Marotta, and on today's episode, we'll be providing our key takeaways from New England's preseason loss to Cleveland and reviewing whose stock is up and whose is down as the cut down to 53 draws near. Let's dive right in, Tyler. It appeared as though the Patriots were more concerned with getting last night's game over with and exiting Cleveland healthy rather than putting together a representative showing on the field. Nearly 40 players at the top of New England's roster did not participate in the game, and in large part, those who were out there, it was a very underwhelming performance from that group. Before we jump into our stock up and stock down from last night's performance, how do you view what exactly transpired on the field last night to conclude preseason action for the Patriots?
Well, it's funny you kind of start with saying they just kind of wanted to probably get the heck out of Cleveland at some point in this game, because that's how it felt. I mean, the Browns marched down the field. I believe their Browns' first two drives were 64 yards and 74 yards that went for touchdowns back to back. I think it was Dylan Gabriel, I guess, of the QB3 on the Browns. Looked like, he wants to make a case for himself to move up the ranks there. I mean, just give him a shout out real quick. He played a great first half in that game. Really kind of got the Browns at the forefront very early on. Just a punch to the jaw of the Patriots' depth defenders early on in that game. And that's to get to the second half, like you said, get the heck out of Dodge or something. Let's stay healthy here and whatnot, and just do whatever we got to do to leave Cleveland without any injuries. Ahead of cut down day this weekend. That's what it felt like for the Patriots. They just kind of went through the motions, it felt, and the Browns just kept plugging away as they had a lot of guys who wanted to make a case on their end to make that team respectively. Just observations as I was sitting in front of my laptop getting ready to write the recap last night is, how does a guy like Mike Vrabel and the rest of the Elliott Wolf and the rest of the Patriots front office decide how to do cut down day after such you could call it a poor performance. I think I used the word uneventful last week, describing, I think, Chad Muma's play a little bit against the Eagles, but that's just what it felt. There was really nothing there. No heart, no drive. I mean, Tommy DeVito came out for 2 series and, he had him and we'll touch on, Kyle Williams in a minute. They had kind of a play there that made it seem like, okay, this might just turn into a shootout between a bunch of backups for at least the first and second quarter. Who knows in the second half? But after that, everything just kind of fizzled out. I don't know what the coaching points were on the players on the sideline. Every time a camera cut to Mike Vrabel, I'm surprised we don't have any memes of Vrabel on the sideline, because he has somewhat interesting facial expressions from time to time when the camera cuts to him and he's a little flustered, mad, or he's just kind of to kind of do it here. As I got a camera in front of me, he just kind of goes like this sometimes. I don't know what it's just funny to me. But yeah, like you said, in terms of stock up, stock down, definitely a lot more stock down on guys who were looking great last week against the Eagles. There's a lot of stuff here a lot of just stuff off my notes that I've written down that, it's almost a shame to see these guys regress a little bit, and everything is week to week in preseason. Just a lot of not great football out of the New England Patriots last night to just sum things up here. So I don't know what your initial thoughts are too. So.
Yeah, once again, it felt like the Patriots did not want to take any chances. We kind of knew that was going to be the case going in, and that was the sentiment that Mike Vrabel shared with the media after last week's game against the Eagles when he put the depth on this team under the spotlight, saying that they did not have a very deep team. And then when you walk out there, a little bit of a divergence from Vrabel in the way that he's handled some of the previous preseason games, especially this fall, where even if players were not going to be participating in the game, they still dressed. They were on the field for warmups. That was not the case. All these guys were in street clothes on the sidelines last night, and it was those players on the fringes of the roster, on the roster bubble, that were trying to leave a lasting impression for the coaching staff. And in large part, they left a poor last impression for the coaching staff as the Patriots try and decide who to keep and who to get rid of within the next 48 hours as we get closer and closer to cut down day. I think that you were trying to see who was going to stand out positively. What ended up happening was more players stood out negatively and created more questions about the depth on this team than we had even going into the game last night. And we're definitely going to be getting into that with our stock up and stock down. So let's start there. And we're going to start as we normally do on the positive end. Definitely a smaller list of players on our stock up list. We're going to do things a little bit differently here just based on the way that the game went last night. But I think that we have to start off with a guy that we had on our stock down list, or I had on my stock down list last week, begrudgingly so. I wanted to find any reason to put him on that stock up list. Just couldn't end up doing that last week. And now we get retribution here for Kyle Williams, second-year wide receiver, who picked a really, really good time to show out in very limited action against the Browns. He played 2 series. He caught both of his targets. One converted a first down on a 3rd and 6 curl route from Tommy DeVito. Great timing between quarterback and receiver to connect on that one. And then, of course, the lone offensive highlight for the Patriots throughout the night came shortly thereafter on Williams' 45-yard touchdown reception on a go ball down the left sideline over former Patriots defensive back D'Angelo Ross, now playing for the Browns. Williams, I was looking for a couple of different things from throughout the course of the preseason, and I hadn't seen them through this point yet, and that's why he was on my stock down list last week. I think finally we can kind of turn the page on that. What I was looking for from Kyle Williams was twofold: consistency and efficiency, and I think that we now have check marks in both of those boxes. Last week, if you removed his big touchdown reception, the 69-yarder down the right sideline, Williams only caught 1 of his 5 targets for 5 receiving yards. That is not going to get it done on any NFL field, and on a field where, for all intents and purposes, I was looking for Kyle Williams to be the best receiver on the field. When you're going against backups and you're going against 3rd string guys that are going to be looking for new jobs within the next week, you're a 3rd round pick with an elite trait like the speed that he has. You should be showing out early and often against this competition, this level of competition. That's exactly what we saw in Cleveland last night for Williams. Again, only played a handful of snaps on 2 drives for the Patriots, but certainly made a lasting impact for the good when he was out there. And I think now that we can look at his preseason in totality, the consistency is certainly there. 3 preseason games for Kyle Williams and 3 preseason touchdowns, 1 in each game. Each of them come on a go ball. Yes, in the first game in the preseason opener against Indianapolis, it was down the left sideline on what almost turned into a back shoulder fade in the corner of the end zone from DeVito. In the second preseason game against Philadelphia, it was down the right sideline on that huge 69-yard touchdown pass. And then once again, that big play in Cleveland down the left sideline for 45 yards. Williams still feels a little bit like a one-trick pony to me. But if he walks into the season right now with that being his one trick, with that elite speed and the ability to take the top off a defense, and you pair him with a guy like A.J. Brown on the opposite side of the field and have a player out there that the defense has to respect his speed and put a safety over the top of him. I think that especially with Drake Maye at quarterback, we know that he likes to aggressively push the ball down the field. That one trick that he does have can be an extremely effective tool in this Patriots offense. And Kyle Williams picked a really good time to show out on the field last night in Cleveland, coming on the heels of Kayshon Boutte's trade to Houston. This is going to be the player that sees an increase in snaps now that Boutte is not in the offense anymore. And it looks like he is primed to make the most of that opportunity. So that's who I have. Big number one overall in our stock up list. Tyler, what'd you see from Kyle Williams last night?
Yeah, 2 passes, 55 yards, a 45-yard touchdown. I mean, this would have been his game to go have a lot of fun if they wanted to play him for the entire first half. But of course, why would you kind of want to do that when out of the wide receivers that were available to kind of go play, Williams is at the forefront of that. And with the Kayshon Boutte trade going down just a few days ago, you don't want to risk it with a guy like Kyle Williams. And you talk about, the go route, being a go ball receiver. I think he is untouchable on the go route right now. He looks incredible. And if that is kind of his, we talked, I think last time about should Kyle Williams get more versatile as a wide receiver in Josh McDaniels' game plan? And I think he should. And I think there's going to be some time for him to do that because I don't think he's going to get all the reps and all the plays and snaps that he probably hopes for with A.J. Brown and Romeo Doubs out on that field. So there's going to be some time to develop that. And maybe we'll see Williams kind of transition into something a month and a half into the season. I'd like to hope. But if that is his kind of one trick to get down the sideline and make plays like that, it's an incredible one. It's awesome to watch. I know he's not going to be able to get to do that a lot in the regular season, but it's been fun to watch in the preseason. I look at Kyle Williams and he is in this weird gray area of the roster right now, especially in the wide receiver room specifically, where he's not a backup to me, really. He's he's a step above a backup, but not, your wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. And, I don't think he's probably ever going to be a wide receiver 1. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. There's guys who've made lengthy careers out of being a 3 or a 4 guy and maybe just bounced around the league a lot more than usual, or maybe stuck with a team for a decade, either or. And I think Kyle Williams has an opportunity to do something like that. And I hope it stays in New England for some time. But yeah, I thought maybe with a play like that, that he caught from Tommy DeVito, maybe this could have given the Patriots a little more of an edge to, it's the Cleveland Browns. Sorry, guys, the Cleveland Browns depth chart. Everybody knows what's going on in Cleveland right now with the quarterback situation, the fan base and whatnot. You thought maybe you'd see a little bit more of a aggressive push offensively and defensively out of the Patriots. But as we know, Mike Vrabel just kind of wanted to get out of town. But very impressed with Kyle Williams just for the two series he was out there, I believe. I do want to just throw out one quick little stock up because, like, it's an obvious thing. We don't have a lot of stock up on this show. Punter Matt Hawk has come in for Bryce Baringer. I can never get his name right. And look, just real quick, he's in for that for who knows how long. Who knows if he's going to be on the roster for an extensive amount of time. That's going to come down to the injury. But 4 punts that landed inside the 20. One was a 63-yarder that set the Browns at their own 2-yard line. Now, since the Patriots defense didn't really do much last night, the Browns still put on a clinic and went out and, I think moved the ball to another score on that drive to begin with. I think that burned about 10 minutes of game clock too. Like
15
I said,
plays, 98 yards, 9 minutes and 26 seconds off the clock at the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. Yeah. But yeah, not Hawk's fault at all. It was a great kick.
It was a great kick. I think he's making a case, for himself that if, the Patriots want to maybe consider something here, he did it last night. Or if, other teams, right now, next 48, actually not even 72 hours anymore, 48 hours, there's teams that are going to be looking around for a punter if they're not happy with their punter at the moment. So he made a case for himself last night. I give him stock up, even if he's not a Patriot come Monday morning, or actually probably into week 1, I would think, judging by how that injury is going. But we'll see how things unfold on that front. But I think he made a very good case for himself that he's a pretty gosh darn good punter.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And that's a good comfort for Patriots fans after seeing Baron Morton taking over as the emergency punter in week 2 against the Eagles and having some questions about the health and availability of Bryce Behringer going into the season. You need to have somebody that can fill in as a stopgap for him. We thought that Behringer was going to see more competition during the preseason. He's going into the last year of his rookie contract this year. By the time we got all the way through training camp and through the first preseason game, it felt like he had the most job security out of any of the specialists on the roster. I wonder if this does play into his long-term stability in New England if Hawk continues to go out there and has consistently good performances. But this, again, feels very much like a stopgap for the Patriots until Behringer can get back out on the field and healthy. But it will be interesting to see how they navigate cutting down to 53 players if this isn't something that is going to keep Behringer out for an extensive period of time. You may have to keep 2 punters around on the active roster. And where does that lead to some interesting decisions elsewhere on the roster? Because you don't normally factor in having to have multiple players at that position in your final count. I'll give you one more before we transition to stock down here. And it's actually not a player on the field, Tyler. How about quarterbacks coach Ashton Grant? We saw Mike Vrabel last year step away from his head coaching duties in week 3 of the preseason and give play calling duties over to now senior assistant or assistant head coach Terrell Williams. He was then the defensive coordinator before he had to step away for the vast majority of last season. We saw that start to become an annual tradition this year with Mike Vrabel, quarterbacks coach Ashton Grant, who actually first crossed paths with Vrabel in Cleveland when he was over there as an assistant. Grant was the quarterbacks coach, same position that he holds now in Foxborough with Cleveland when Vrabel was there in 2024. Ends up bringing him over, and he has been a key cog in the development of Drake Maye over the last 2 seasons. Nice little tip of the cap from Vrabel to Grant last night as he made him the offensive play caller. You saw Josh McDaniels up in the booth, not typically where he resides during game action. So kind of stepping back a little bit, giving the keys to the castle of the offense over to Ashton Grant for a game day last night. And this guy seems to be an extremely quickly ascending assistant for the Patriots. That was a really nice little thing to see that Vrabel did. Again, making that a sort of annual tradition where he has one of these assistants that's been a standout during the offseason, take on some added responsibility during the last preseason game. All right, so we are going to transition now to a more lengthy stock down list. And the way that I kind of want to work this, Tyler, is instead of just going through specific players, we talked about earlier on in the show how depth was a concern at multiple different position groups going into last night. And this was really the final audition for many of those players in those position groups to make an impression on the coaching staff as we get closer and closer to the cut down to 53 players. So rather than going through individual players, I want to take a look at these position groups as a whole and maybe see who was a standout in these groups, who underwhelmed in these groups, and which of these we feel like is a more pressing need than others for the Patriots to look for some external addition through the waiver wire or with a late round draft pick kind of trade that we see so many of take place this weekend. Let's start with the offensive line. They had a very shaky performance against the Philadelphia Eagles last week. I think another shaky performance in Cleveland last night. Who stood out to you on the offensive line, either for good reasons or for bad reasons? And how do you feel about the depth in this room right now?
I don't, I'll get to the offensive line in 2 seconds, but a lot of people have kind of been critiquing Baron Morton a lot in the last 24 hours. And I got to be honest, Baron Morton isn't completely at fault because I think the offensive line just had problems doing run blocking and whatnot and just really being able to protect. I mean, Morton, I forget how many times he was sacked last night. He had 2 interceptions also, one going off of a foot that flew up into the air. That was one that kind of got away from him. And I think Morton just struggled because of who was in front of him again. And I've been picking on James Hudson a lot the last few weeks, and I'm going to slightly do it again, but I do think he took a big step forward this week. 78.0 PFF score last night, which I think was actually pretty solid for what we've seen out of him throughout preseason and training camp. Left the game with an arm injury. He was in the blue tent for a little while, but he returned. Did allow one pressure in 25 snaps, but I think whatever was translated to him in terms of disciplinary football was somewhat conveyed. I feel he wasn't getting, I don't know if he got flagged at all last night. So I think definitely a step up from what I've seen, but do I think we are going to see his name on the roster Sunday evening? I'm still very iffy about that. I don't really think the Patriots have seen much out of him to convince them to bring him in on their depth. But there's just a lot of questions to be answered in the next 48 hours in terms of who's going to be what and who's going to be where. He's been shifted all over the offensive line. Can they make a case for him at guard or tackle? And I don't know. Like, was there something bad enough that really boosts him off? But is there something slightly good enough that keeps him around for a little while longer? I don't know. I don't know if this game really kind of proves much to the decision makers at the Patriots in terms of who's sticking around because of just how things were conducted by them in that game. It almost felt like they had their mind made up on a lot of things and they were just going through the motions to play the game and get out of town. Like, we talked about at the top of the show. But Hudson to me doesn't really feel like a roster lock, didn't really feel like a roster bubble at all this past week. But again, saw some improvement and whatnot, but I have my reservations.
Yeah, I'll touch on your Baron Morton point to start here with the offensive line, because I know when you look at the numbers and look, it certainly wasn't the greatest performance by any means by the Patriots offensive line in this game. When you look at it, 11 pressures, 4 sacks allowed. And especially in the passing game, they were still leaky left and right. But I look at last night's performance by Baron Morton and the step back that he had as more of a rookie showing for him than he had last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. I actually put a little bit more on him as the quarterback and some of the indecision that he had in making plays from the pocket than I do on the offensive line on a few of those sacks. There was one that was given up by Maye Butler in the second quarter where he decisively lost very quickly off the snap, and Morton gets sacked on that play. But on the other sacks, actually, if you're looking at it on PFF, for anybody that dives into those numbers, that was the only sack that was credited to the offensive line as an individual statistic, was that Maye Butler sack. Otherwise, it was more so Baron Morton holding on to the ball a little bit too long, not progressing through his reads down the field. And even when he was progressing through his reads down the field, not always pulling the trigger when he should have. There was one play in the second quarter on a 3rd and 8 down in the red zone. Actually, a couple of plays back to back. On the second down, he sailed one out over the sidelines, right over the head of Nick DeGennaro in what looked to be a cover 2 hole shot right near the goal line there. He comes back on that 3rd down and completely misses the throw, just doesn't pull the trigger on a deep dig route to Kyle Dixon right at the goal line there. A good game from Kyle Dixon too, by the way, 8 catches, 71 yards. We were really waiting to see if he was going to put something together. He was one of the more high profile undrafted free agents that the Patriots had this season, and we didn't really see it click until last night. But overall, I think that this is the trials and tribulations of having a rookie quarterback and a 7th round rookie quarterback at that. Baron Morton maybe just not as confident in what he was seeing down the field. His second interception was one of those kind of plays as well. His second credited interception, because he really could have had 3 or 4 picks. There was one that was called back on a questionable defensive pass interference call. There was another dropped interception in the end zone when he rolled out of the pocket and threw it back across his body. And we know that is a big no-no for any NFL quarterback. One of the first things that they try to teach out of your game. But on that second credited interception, it looked like both offensive tackles on the play ran cut blocks on that 4th and 2 play. And normally when you see that, that means that's going to be a play where it is snap and throw. And there is no holding on to the ball. He looked like he was going to pull the trigger, pulls the ball back, ends up scrambling outside of the pocket, and once again tries to force a pass down the sidelines to Nick DeGennaro into what looked to be triple coverage. I mean, I don't think there was any chance that DeGennaro was going to be able to work his way back to the football there, and just an easy interception for the Browns at that point. But I put a little bit more on Baron Morton than I do the offensive line. No, it wasn't perfect. I thought that they held up extraordinarily better against the run or during running plays than they did last week, especially in short yardage situations. You saw some great push. There was an awesome block by Demetrius Crownover on an early 4th down conversion. You saw a nice combination block a little bit later in the game with Mekhi Butler and Jacob Rizzi, opening a hole for Hassan Haskins to convert. I thought that there was a lot more to take positively from the Patriots offensive line's performance in this game than we saw last week against Philadelphia. Obviously, again, still some leaks, especially in the pass protection area of the game for them, but not as bad, I think, as advertised after we got out of this one. All right, so let's move on to the defensive line now. And this is where I think stock down a little bit more for a lot of different guys, specifically Gabe Akis. Tyler, I'll let you start on him. What'd you see from Gabe Akis last night? Stock up or stock down on his end?
I'm going to go with stock down because I think there's just a lot of young guy mistakes that need to be fixed in coaching. And I'm going to embarrass myself a little bit off the top here because I need to compare a now professional football player to the stuff that I learned as an 8th grade suburban league defensive end. And
let's go.
This is going to get me so much flack, but, playing, at the time it wasn't even called edge rusher, but, I had my struggles. I wasn't a big kid, but one of the science of that position is learning when to stay home and learning to kind of really move strong on the outside. And the risk you're kind of taking there is over pursuing. That was the one word that I heard a lot was don't over pursue. You over pursued, you missed, you couldn't get off the block. The running back went right by you. You overshot the quarterback and he felt comfortable with the pocket in the pocket, even though you were right there, and you let yourself get blocked. Gabe Akis kind of had some struggles in that area. And it's happened pretty much every time he's been on the field that I've noticed all preseason long. He kind of over pursues. He over pursues where he's going. He gives up the edge too easy. And this is stuff I don't want to see out of a guy like this. I mean, you and I have given him nothing but praises since he's been drafted. I know there's been some critiques leading up to things and how he's missed a lot of, early on practices and whatnot and the first part of training camp. So we kind of knew maybe there'd be a slight delay with him, but I think by now we would have had Akis kind of go out there and make something happen that we're like, okay, that's why we drafted this guy. But yeah, gives up the edge too easy, in my opinion. And he's getting burned on bootlegs too, and the option play. And if you're an edge rusher getting burned on the option play, that is a strong concern for me, for the Patriots coaching staff. That is prime territory of the field where an edge rusher can be in there mixing stuff up, and he's just not there, or he's somewhere too high on the field or still too low, or he's just not where the guy with the ball is. And it's just frustrating for me to watch that kind of thing play out. But the fact of the matter is, these are coaching points that a good coach can instill in a young player, especially a young player coming into the NFL, that you can also learn from an 8th grade suburban league defensive end. But that's just kind of stuff that I think we're going to see over time. Like, again, I went from thinking Akis was going to be a day one starter, and now I think we'll see what rotational plays he gets in the mix as the months unfold going forward. There's not a lot of depth really in that region of the roster, and that makes me a little nervous if Akis does have to go in there out of the gate. And a lot of, I think we're playing a pretty solid, good running game, on a lot of teams this year. And so if they can kind of work their way around and burn him on the option plays and on bootlegs, I don't know. It's just concerning to me. And Akis just kind of really let me down last night again. So
Tyler, I love it. Your 8th grade defensive line coach must have been something, because you're pulling this out however many years later. And that was fantastic. I think you hit the nail right on the head with everything that you said. The over pursuit was the perfect word for that. And I think what we've seen from teams now through 3 preseason games is an exploitation of Akis's over aggressiveness in pursuing those plays. I mean, with the read option play on that 3rd and 2, where Akis gets way too deep into the backfield and gives Dillon Gabriel an easy angle to the outside edge there to convert on that first down. I think what you saw on that play was something that Akis has probably seen 1,000 times in college. That is a very common play at the collegiate level. That's something that he should not be over pursuing by the time he gets to the NFL level. I understand it a little bit more with the play action boot stuff, because how many college teams are actually running their offense under center and are giving you that eye candy of hanging the football out there and putting it in the running back's belly and then pulling it and booting it out the other way. I can understand that one a little bit more, but you saw the Eagles last week hit Akis with that very early on in the game. That was actually the Browns' first passing play of the night last night, was on a boot action concept where Dillon Gabriel boots out of the pocket on Akis's side and completes a pass. And the one pressure that Akis actually got in the backfield to generate last night was on a similar type play. And it ultimately ended up resulting in a 52-yard gain down the sideline to Ben Patterson, who has since been waived by the Cleveland Browns and is out there looking for a new NFL home, just one day after he made the largest offensive gain for either team in that game last night. So we'll talk about the Patriots secondary momentarily here. That's more of a gripe that I have with them on that play specifically. But Akis, I think you hit the nail on the head once again here. Over pursuit for him is going to end up cutting into his playing time, I think, come the start of the regular season, because this is very clearly something that teams have already identified as a weakness in his game, and they are continuing to attack over and over again. If we're already getting that in preseason games, that's only going to get worse come the regular season. And right now, Akis, for all intents and purposes, is one of your top rotational players on the edge. We're looking at potentially keeping anywhere between 3 and 5 edge rushers. We'll see what happens with Harold Landry. If he comes off the PUP list, it doesn't seem like he's trending in that direction. But you could very realistically, if Harold Landry's out for the first 4 weeks, be in a situation where you have 3 edge rushers on this team. Akis being one of them would see a significant amount of playing time. And I just don't feel comfortable with that at this point, if that's the case to start things out week 1. So this would certainly be a position where I would be still looking for some external additions to be made within the next few days here before the start of the regular season. Let's move to the second level of the Patriots defense now. The linebacking core has drawn the ire of many fans through the first 3 preseason games here as we head into the regular season. Who stood out in that room to you either positively or negatively last night?
Just a few out of the gate. Chad Muma, he's on the roster bubble. This is a guy who went out there and he played pretty much I think he played most of the game last night, which really isn't really that good of a sign, especially in a game like this. Muma was on my roster down last week, and I got him kind of on here not roster down, stock down. All the 53-man rosters and stock down are confusing me a little bit. But he's on my stock down again this week, kind of for the same reasons. Just a lot of uneventful play out there. Missing a couple open field tackles, giving up some completions where he's kind of in a space where he can mix things up. I kind of feel like the Browns went after him a little bit. I mean, he probably was coming into this game very banged up. He left the Eagles game last week late. It must have not been too bad because he knows he's got to play, because this is a guy who has kind of fallen from grace a little bit. He really kind of was that linebacker number 3 at the start of training camp behind Ellis and Spillane. Had that green sticker on his helmet at one point. But I think guys like KJ Britt have excelled. Khalil Jacobs, who I know didn't play last night, he's excelled as well. Nnamdi Obiizor did play great. I would put him on a stock up if, situation, if we were kind of doing an actual full blown one here. Led the team with 12 tackles, five solo stops, by the way. Nice open field tackle against one of the Browns running backs they had out there. He impressed me probably out of the bunch the most, but guys like Chad Muma, again, it's almost a shame here to kind of put him in this because I was such a fan of his 3-4 weeks ago. I also do want to throw out Amari Gaynor on the field there. Had a roughing the passer penalty, which I think with how that game was starting to shift in the Browns' favor early on, especially I don't know. I think he just kind of shot himself in the foot there. I mean, this is a guy who against the Eagles last week was credited with 3 team pressures and secured a halftime sack. So I kind of saw him regress a lot, and he's very much in the roster bubble situation. And just kind of like the edges, this is just a thin area of the Patriots roster. I wouldn't even want to just say defense in general. A lot of thin ice here in the linebacker room, I feel. So just to kind of see these guys not really, mainly Muma and Gaynor, to kind of not really have too much of an impact or a negative impact in that sense is alarming to me 48 hours out from 53-man roster selection.
Absolutely. It was great to see Obiizor have a great impact on the game, but I think the storyline here for the Patriots linebacking core was really the culmination of the rise and fall of Chad Muma this summer. We began the offseason program and into the early part of training camp thinking that he was potentially on deck to be that Jack Gibbons replacement as the first rotational linebacker off the bench for the defense, wore the green dot on several occasions when Robert Spillane was not on the field in the early part of the summer. And to see him playing and not playing extraordinarily well into the fourth quarter of the last preseason game of the year just kind of shows you how far he's fallen in the eyes of the coaching staff. He's had a rough 3 preseason games back to back to back. Was not great against the Colts. Continued that with more missed tackles and just not a lot of speed from him on the field. I think that was evident last night. Again, the big run that Taylon Green had to kind of get the Browns out of the shadow of their own goalpost on that 98-yard touchdown drive. Muma had an opportunity to make a play right near the first down marker, and Green just ran right past him like he wasn't even there. So not a great showing again from Chad Muma, and it's unfortunate, but I don't know if there's necessarily a path to a roster spot for him anymore. I thought it was extremely telling that Khalil Jacobs did not suit up for the Patriots last night, coming out as an undrafted rookie free agent. He's been extremely impressive, a guy that you were on very early on in the history of this show, going all the way back to when we first did our look at the undrafted rookie free agent signings. Khalil Jacobs was kind of your guy, and it feels like he has done everything that he's needed to secure a roster spot for himself. So I think that's a good thing. I think ultimately when you look at the way that room pans out, KJ Britt has a much more realistic opportunity to be a part of this team come September 9th than Chad Muma does right now. But again, another one of these groups where I wouldn't be surprised if they were looking at the waiver wire, they were looking at the trade market to see if there was somebody that they could bring in that's a little bit more dependable if they need them to play any significant snaps during the season. Don't forget, Robert Spillane did miss some pretty significant time due to injury last season. He's only a year older now. So that's something that you need is injury insurance in that room. Very similar to the Patriots secondary. And I think that this and the running back battle, which we'll talk about next, were really the two that we honed in on going into this game with roster spots for the taking. And it felt to me going into the game like almost like Charles Woods and Kindle Vildor were both battling for one spot in that corner room as that veteran substitute corner behind on the boundary behind Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis. I would put both of them in my stock down category. I don't think it was a very good showing for either one of them. Vildor had a pass interference very early on, gave up a couple of chunk gains. He also, on that first drive of the game, missed the tackle at the goal line that led to Luke Floria's first touchdown of 2 on the night in that first quarter. And Charles Woods was the player that was supposed to be in coverage, in man-to-man coverage on him on that play. And he ran into Nnamdi Obiizor at the line of scrimmage right when the ball was snapped. Again, another one of those play-action boot kind of plays where Florio was leaking out into the flat, and Woods just could not stay with him over the top of the second level of the Patriots defense. Woods was targeted 5 times in the game last night, and he gave up 5 receptions. So if you're looking at PFF grades again, both of those players were the 2 lowest graded New England Patriots in coverage last night. Not a great showing from either one of those. Tyler, what'd you see from this secondary battle for the Patriots?
Yeah, Vildor just really let me down. You know, again, he was on my stock up last week. I think he's been on my stock up all preseason. Had just a great first 2 weeks. I don't want to necessarily write him off completely, but yeah, that I think it was the first touchdown, the Luke Floria touchdown at the goal line. It was him and the 2 of them toe to toe. He got bulldozed over for the Browns to secure that touchdown. It wasn't really a pretty sight to see. It seems like these guys were big targets, kind of like going back to linebackers. Chad Mumu, I felt like was a target last night. They really kind of wanted to almost finish the guy off in a cutthroat fashion and not have him end up on a team anytime soon. Karan Prunty as well, I think, had some trouble finishing some tackles. He was bouncing around out there. I don't think he had a bad game, but I just think he struggled with a lot of open field tackles. He bounced off of guys that I think he should have stopped. 14 tackles missed, I believe, by this secondary last night. Another guy on my list, safety John Saunders, was on stock up for me again. I talked about him last week. Missed a tackle that led to a 52-yard gain. He also got missed a tackle or missed a stop. I think he got bulldozed over by Floria as well at the goal line, again, going the other way for the Browns. This is a guy who had 5 interceptions total in preseason between, training camp and games. But I think he's back on the roster bubble. And I think he's kind of been on the roster bubble, hopping off, hopping on, depending on the day. Ugh. But I think with the Patriots now, who have traded for Kayshon Boutte and brought a guy like Jalen Reed into the mix, that is going to make things interesting going forward in terms of that safety room. But again, the Browns offense was slinging it all night. Run game was great. A lot of credit to them. Just a lot of great plays. Guys who just went out there and played some incredible offense against a defense that just did not seem to show up. Vildor really let me down again. That him getting ran over by Floria at the goal line was not a pretty sight to see at the top of the game for a guy I've admired all preseason long. And with all this information, let me give a honorable stock up to Christian Gonzalez, a guy who wasn't even on the field last night. Gonzalez didn't dress. Obviously, the news is out there. We've been reporting on it and writing about any sort of whispers of that we know, or, just whatever else other people are talking about on the site. The contract extension talks are really heating up. Apparently, they're not even anywhere near anything at this moment. If how this secondary played last night tells you anything, it means that the Patriots front office goes, crap. Gonzalez is our guy, and we need him around long term, because as great as some of these players have played in the preseason, they can have an off game. And sometimes with guys like this, an off game can lead to 2 off games, 3 off games. Christian Gonzalez is there for you every Sunday playing lights out football, even when the rest of the team might not be playing good. So stock up for Christian Gonzalez to hopefully get this thing ironed out before kickoff in Seattle.
Yeah, Christian Gonzalez is probably feeling pretty good about himself. I don't think I've ever felt any better about having Christian Gonzalez on this team, nor have I felt worse about the depth behind him. Charles Woods has really seemingly been the coaching staff's preferred first substitute for either Gonzalez or Carlton Davis. Seeing him playing late into the fourth quarter of that game last night, he actually was out there longer than Kindle Vildor was. Again, both of them very uninspired performances. But when you have Charles Woods out there giving up chunk gains to guys named Gage Larvadane, seriously, I don't think that should inspire much confidence.
No offense to the guy.
He has to, but if he's going to be going out and playing some of the NFL's best on the boundary, I don't think that you should really feel all that good about that right now. And I don't think that anybody, even the coaching staff included, does feel very good about where they're at depth-wise behind those outside two boundary corners. So one little credence or credit that I will give to Charles Woods is that we did see a little bit of a different role from him last night. He has typically played on the boundary. He primarily aligned in the slot last night for the Patriots. That was something that we saw Channing Canada do in the opener against the Indianapolis Colts. He was out last week. You saw Vildor kind of slide inside a little bit more often in that game. This time it was Woods' turn. I think that they're really trying to figure out who that backup nickel defender behind Marcus Jones is going to be, because as thin as they are on the boundaries, they are even thinner behind Marcus Jones in the slot. I think that was a big reason why they go out and get a player like Jalen Reed in the trade for Kayshon Boutte, because he is one of those box safeties, big nickel defenders that'll come down and play near the line of scrimmage. So you can use him as a basically slot corner in addition to everything that he gives you at safety. And I think that his addition also spelled the end for John Saunders, as you mentioned. Saunders, not a great game for him last night either. In the third level of the defense there for the Patriots, again, another one of these players that played deep into the fourth quarter. So if you're looking at playing time as any indication, especially considering how many players the Patriots just decided, you don't need to dress for this game tonight because we don't want you to get hurt. Those players that they were comfortable having out on the field that late into the game, I think you have to start to question where exactly they are in terms of their standing with the coaching staff and their likelihood to be on the roster. I think that actually serves as a good transition for us talking last but not least about the running backs on this team, because Tyler, I think the Patriots may have tipped their hand just a little bit in the battle for that third running back role. This is one of the position battles that a lot of twists and turns through the offseason. It's looked to go in a few different directions. Two players I think stood out for all the right reasons last night, and that was because they got very limited playing time. First and foremost, Jam Miller, who I understand was dealing with a little bit of some sort of injury. He was held out of practice a couple of times this week. He did not play against the Browns. And Lan Larison, who I have been extremely high on through this entire process, only played those first two drives with Tommy DeVito and Kyle Williams and company there. So Larison, if playing time is any indication, could be the leader in the clubhouse. If Miller is not already, if that was an injury-related reason that he missed the game, that's one thing. If they were trying to keep him fresh for the regular season, that's another thing there. But it looks like, once again, we're kind of back to Lan Larison versus Jam Miller for that RB3 battle. And I think the Patriots, based on the playing time, tipped their hand a little bit with Lan Larison, seeing Hassan Haskins playing into the fourth quarter and seeing JaMychal Hasty playing into the fourth quarter. Although they had very nice performances out on the field for the Patriots in the limited opportunities that they had when the Patriots could actually run the ball based on game script there, I think that they did a good job with that. But seeing them out there versus seeing Lan Larison on the sidelines for the vast majority of that game kind of gave me a little bit more confidence that you could be seeing Lan Larison included on this 53-man roster come Sunday evening. Did you read things the same way? Where are you at with this running back battle?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at these three preseason games, I feel like Larison has been the one for these other guys to be compared to, almost like he's the standard in terms of with these other guys kind of surrounding him. You know, Jam Miller had a great game against the Colts, great rundown, great downfield runner and whatnot, physical guy, had a better game. You could argue he had a better game than Lan Larison. Lan Larison didn't have a bad game against the Colts, just caught passes more than he ran the ball per se. Against the Eagles, Larison definitely was the standout player, that being the second game here. But then you get to the third game and you got Hassan Haskins, who Features was the more physical downhill runner out of the backfield. I had his stats a minute ago and I just lost it. But Larison, rushed for 2 times, 5 yards, 2 targets. Again, I think they just, got him in there, got him out of there. And I think that does say a lot about probably where they are leaning more towards. I'm not saying these guys didn't go out and have a great preseason. They did. Jay Miller, I was hot on for about a week and a half, I think, till Larison just had a pretty solid game against the Eagles. And I think he really does fit into Josh McDaniels' schemes a lot more than these guys, in terms of being that physical running back, as well as reminding you a little bit of like Danny Woodhead or something in terms of just being able to, catch things out on the side, going one-on-one with a linebacker.
Get the Rex Burkhead comparisons a lot, and I forgot
about Rex. I forgot. People forget about Danny Woodhead. He's such a little guy, but I thought he was. Oh my god! For those 3 or 4 years he was on the team, I loved watching that guy play. But yeah, I think Larison is going to be the RB3. I think he fits the mold in terms of that. If you look at these 3 guys, let's say Larison is the RB3. Travion Henderson and Stevenson, they all kind of bring something different to the table. And Stevenson also, I think, works really well as kind of being a catching pass running back kind of guy too as well. We saw him do that late in the year last year. So again, loved what I saw of Hassan Haskins, physical guy, but they kept him out there pretty much all game, which tells me a lot that he's either going to be fighting tooth and nail for this, or they just needed somebody on the field. It's a cutthroat business, the NFL is, but that's just how it goes. I see guys like him and Jam Miller making the practice squad, but it's 100% Larison in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it really could come down to if there is some question because Miller didn't play in the game last night, maybe they're holding on to him to keep him healthy for the regular season. Again, he did miss a couple of practices during the week. And I continue to return back to the value of, in a Josh McDaniels system, having that red shirt season for a running back when you're learning the intricacies of pass protection and all of your responsibilities, especially as a third down back, and something that we still haven't seen Travion Henderson make the kind of strides that you would hope and expect him to make at this point in his career. Very quiet training camp so far from him. So he is right now, although he has the potential to be a very versatile third down running back with the kind of skill set that he brings to the table, the physicality and the breakaway speed that he has, would be an electric receiver out of the backfield. We just haven't seen him kind of put that all together quite yet. So Larison does bring a very different skill set. I really think that's kind of what it comes down to here is, do you prefer having another between the tackles running back, or do you like the versatility that Larison gives you as a receiver out of the backfield and somebody that you can also use on special teams? I think that's why he gets the nod at this point for me. And I think that's what you saw in his usage last night. All right, Tyler, any closing thoughts as we wrap up all of our preseason coverage of the Patriots here before we turn the page and are on to Seattle?
It's a loaded question of what to expect in roster cuts based off of what we saw, but I think there've been some clues there, obviously, just right there with, kind of the running back, the RB3 situation that was very telling to me. But in terms of like these thin areas, your linebackers on the edge and whatnot, and even, with depth we've seen in the offensive line and whatnot, are these guys really what Mike Vrabel wants on his team in 2026? What to expect is, I don't know what to expect. I think when this roster drops, or whenever, hopefully it's not right at 5:59 p.m. Hopefully like we get something a little earlier on in the day, and you and I can kind of soak it up before we talk about it next time. What to expect? I don't really know what to expect. There's so many questions to be answered, I guess, going into, cut downs. Because I think there's guys who didn't have good games last night that I still think are on this team. That, there's a lot of guys in the secondary that played god-awful football last night, but I don't know if I want to write them off yet completely. Because again, you write them off. You got a crisis of contract extension with Christian Gonzalez right now. So there's a lot going on. There's going to be a lot going on over the next 48 hours, I think, with the Patriots. even with stuff that you and I haven't even touched on tonight. So it's going to be a busy news weekend, I feel. So don't avoid Patriots Roundtable at all. There's my plug for the site to cap things off here.
Yeah, absolutely. What we can expect in the next 48 hours, a lot of cuts by the Patriots and maybe even some additions from some of the cuts from other teams, waiver wire claims, trades from late round draft picks, moving on from those kind of ancillary pieces to get guys in the building that you feel like can contribute more immediately to this team, certainly in a win now mode entering the 2026 regular season, and want to have a little bit more confidence in the depth behind the starters at several of these positions that had an underwhelming performance last night. All right, guys, that is going to do it for us here on the Patriots Roundtable Podcast here tonight. If this is your first touch point with us, we'd like to thank you for being here and for staying all the way until the end. For more from us on Patriots, be sure to head over to the Patriots Roundtable website at roundtable.io. And if you're enjoying what we do with the show on, I would say, more than a weekly basis now at this point, we've had a few touch points with you here this week. The best way you could possibly support us is by joining as a member on the Roundtable website. It's fast, it's easy, and it's completely free. And your membership allows you to join the discussion directly with us. We're trying to build a great community of sports fans over on the site, and your membership would help us greatly with that. So please head over to roundtable.io using the link in the description below and tell us what you think. Who stood out to you in the Patriots preseason finale against the Browns? Where do you think the New England Patriots need to add to before cut down day wraps up on Sunday? Let us know in the comment section below or over on the community boards on the Roundtable website. We look forward to seeing you there. For Tyler Geis, I'm Eddie Marotta. Be sure to stay locked on right here to the Patriots Roundtable Podcast. We'll be back with you on Sunday to react to all of the cut downs that the Patriots make and their final 53-man roster entering the 2026 regular season. For all of us here at Patriots Roundtable, I'd like to thank you again for listening. We are signing off. Until next time.